everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Talkin' Tongue, the weekly quarantine show where I get to talk to my friends near and far to talk about some movies, thumbs, cats, lots of thumb action. I mean, our audio audience can't see this, but there's a lot of thumb action, more than usual, which is surprising because, Talkin' Tongue, we're all thumbs around here and tongues.
I'm having a hard time not finding that sexual somehow.
I don't know sexual.
If a lot of thumb action is sexual to anybody, but maybe just me.
Yeah, you know what? The person all the way in so far now, I can't keep track of where he is. He is a nomad himself, just wandering around, thumbing people. That doesn't sound good. Josef Addleman, how do you feel about thumbing?
Hi, audience. Good. I appreciate having opposable thumbs. I think they allow me to do a lot of stuff. I feel liberated by them. And I hope that my thumbing causes joy to the world rather than harm.
Use it responsibly. Your thumbs.
That's my goal.
Joe, it's so good to see you and hear your voice. It's been a hell of a long time. People who don't know, Joe is an early member of the Pod Cavern. He's been dwelling deep for a very long time when Pod Cavern was first born in a place that we both lived together, essentially.
And Joe was in a little cave of the cavern.
It's just when it was a wee little cave. Wee little cave that smelled a little bit on a on the top floor of a triplex and no air condition. So
no.
Oh, who's hot in there? But Joe, it's been so long. I mean, the last time you stepped foot in the Pod Cavern was, you were on a bunch of episodes of Ranked back in the day, back when I invited you in person to do these things. I swung
by your newer abode in well, I guess not your current abode, your previous abode in Waterloo.
Yeah.
One time, and we talked about something.
I think is it probably video game related?
Video games or supervillains or something.
Supervillains, bosses you'd like to work? No, wait,
that might have been it.
Villains you'd like to work for? Is that it?
Yeah.
I forget what we landed on that. But
probably Skeletor. It's usually Skeletor.
It's always Skeletor. Yeah. But yeah, Joe, you've never been on Talkin' Tongue, and it's a show where it's an excuse for me to send a little podcast arm out to people, an excuse for me to be like, hey, I missed you, but I'm not going to talk to you unless I have it recorded.
Exactly.
So yeah. Joe, what have you been up to? Tell me.
Well, I've been a traveling man for a little bit. I don't know. Time warp, obviously. I've been in a time warp like many of us. I don't know how time works. Since living with you back in Ottawa, I moved back to Toronto briefly and then went up north to teach for a while. And then a thing called COVID came along and I ran away. The world ended. I went back to my hometown in Fredericton, New Brunswick, drove across this fine country in a hurry and got across the New Brunswick border just before they closed it to all traffic. I've been living here since last March. Kind of spent a lot of time sitting out in the woods with my family, making sense of the world. And since then, I just started teaching again this January or so, being a substitute teacher, which is a whole bold new world. Big excitement for me. In New Brunswick, it's been relatively chill in terms of we haven't had that many cases going on compared to, say, Ontario. So sometimes it's felt like there is not much of a pandemic, but just a week or two ago, I was in a middle school having a great time and got a call a little bit after that at almost midnight that was like, oh, hey, by the way, there was a positive case in that school in one of the classes you were teaching. So stay in your house for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing right now is back to stay in your house for 2 weeks.
Dang.
Hoping somebody brings me some groceries.
I'll bring you some groceries if you decide to move back here, which is probably not going to happen.
Holding me hostage like a true friend.
Just like the old days when we lived together. Remember those times I held you hostage in your
Come
own
on my
room.
podcast and you can have groceries.
Wow, yeah. It sounds like you've been on quite a journey since the beginning of the pandemic. And if we rewind even further, some people don't even know the core of Joe. Who is Josef Addleman? Like, if
Who
you had to
is Joseph
describe
Addleman?
yourself, how would you do it?
A big nerd, I guess. Big nerd is the easiest label to put on myself.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Yeah, game nerd. We played a lot of board games back in the day.
Oh my God.
Still big into that.
I miss that
I spend a
so
lot of
much.
time imagining things, doing tabletop role playing, some video games of that sort. Also thinking about stuff like when I was living with you, I was doing a degree about brains and
Mhm.
cognitive science. So that's still fun to think about what the mush in our heads does and how to build mush in our heads or similar things out of other things that are less mushy.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Um,
I want to dive into this. Whenever you say mush, I'm thinking mushrooms. It's like, oh yeah, the mushrooms in our head. Oh, interesting. That's what your whole degree was, if I remember correctly. You
yeah,
just
not
mushrooms.
putting mushrooms into your head, which is a different degree program. I haven't really done much study in that area, sadly.
Sounds like
But
a Last of Us type of dealio over there. But
oh yeah,
Joe, with yourself here, like this board game, and I assume this goes into our next section over here where it's like what keeps you the happiest. You've always been like myself, is why we got along so well. I mean, we came up in the not came up in the world of improv together because you've done it for a very long time. Then you moved to Ottawa and you helped mentor me in improv, and then we saw a bunch of shows together.
too
We did a
kind.
lot of performing together. It was a very fun time. I miss it very much. But another thing that got us together, not just with improv and you just living with us, which was board games and D&D and
Yeah,
tabletop.
rolling some
And
dice, moving bits of plastic around,
yeah, I
making little
have to
mouth
say,
noises, pew pew pew.
oh,
Yeah,
pew pew pew, like the imagination that you have to create campaigns for D&D, I've always appreciated. Like I'm still a very big noob in D&D, and you made it very simple to be like, hey, you just have to know enough, and you as DM would guide me through the options I had, which I really appreciate because I love doing the role play, but I was just so lazy to do all the reading because there's so much.
there's a lot of paper to go through if you really want to. Yeah,
And I get it. Like that paper is like, here's a set of rules that you don't have to follow to the T. But I didn't want to read the rules anyways. I just
yeah.
wanted to pretend I forget what I was when I was playing with you. Do you remember what I was?
You were a druid. I think you were some kind of elf. You didn't wear a shirt most of the time. I know that. A lot of thrusting of the chest.
This sounds
Uh,
like me in real
yeah, had
life.
a real presence in the room. Uh,
Excellent.
yeah,
Excellent.
man, good times. Yeah, honestly, when I'm doing games, if I'm running a game, like that's the kind of player I would prefer to deal with for the most part. I would prefer somebody who's just like doesn't really know the rules and probably isn't really going to learn them, that many of them, but is willing to like go out there and play and
Yeah.
try stuff. I'd rather have that than somebody who's like super into the minutiae of the rules and like knows them better than I do and is going to argue with me about stuff. I'm like, okay, step
uh,
on the story that we're creating together.
uh-huh. So with like board game, we'll start with board games and we'll go back to this whole tabletop idea because I think a lot of people, including myself through the pandemic, has like, I'll be honest with you, Joe, like when you've met me and years before I met you and just a little bit after you moved out, like I was really into board games. Like I loved board games. I have a picture of you for an episode of Ranked where you are basically naked on top of, or like piled on top of you is all of your board games.
I think I
And
have that picture somewhere too.
I
Yes.
also have that picture.
On
I
my phone,
framed it.
on my lock screen. Yeah.
Yeah, your lock screen. And I didn't tell you it wasn't for the website; it was for me. So, but yeah, like, do you find with the pandemic, especially because you liked collecting real board games and playing
Yeah.
physical board games with people? How has that changed for you?
Yeah, that's a funny an interesting way of framing that question because I'm looking over here at my like little collection of board games. And honestly, like my collection probably used to be bigger before I like changed houses 10 times in 5 years and
Mm-hmm.
left some of them behind in different places. But yeah, even now it's like having the collection of physical board games is something that's important to me, of just like, if some people come over, I want to like have 10 different options of things we can bust out. And like, even just thinking of all the little colorful pieces and bits of wood and plastic in there is like comforting to me.
Yeah.
So and yeah, even a couple of times during the pandemic, I've acquired a few new games, or like, backed stuff on Kickstarter, even though it's like, when am I next going to get to play these in person?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. So have you been able to play? I mean, of course, we social distance and we can't
yeah.
see a lot of people, but have you found yourself able to play any of these games with
Yeah.
people? Yeah.
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky. Like I mentioned that I'm in New Brunswick here, and at least for a lot of the last year, we've been in a pretty fortunate place. Like we've had a couple of windows of like 0 cases for a little while, or like double digits for the most part, in the whole province. So a lot of the time, we've been able to have like a bubble of 10 or even 15 people, which has
Wow.
included a nice little board game crew. It's been a little while since we've gotten people physically together, but yeah, a buddy of mine back in November shares a birthday weekend with me and organized like a 7-hour game of Twilight Imperium, which, if people haven't heard of that, is one of those giant coffin-sized board games that fills up a whole dining room table and then some, and will take you all day. Like, it's an event that you have to plan around.
Yeah,
Uh,
you love those board games. Those
yeah, I
those
mean, I'm old enough now and busy enough that like, even for me, something like that is like maybe a once a year kind of
uh-huh.
adventure, but cool
The
when you can make it
I've
happen.
immediately thought of Twilight, the vampires, the
Yeah,
board
not
game.
not related.
You don't get to like move a plastic Robert Pattinson around.
I mean, it's a big. There are probably some sparkly space vampires in the game somewhere at this point in one of the expansions, but I haven't
Yeah.
gone that deep into it.
Mm. The idea of playing, and I loved playing board games with you and the people back in the day. It was just so fun, and especially again, you love to absorb these rules and like think about them after you're done playing, which is great.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, do you also would you play like a digital version of those board games? Like I've seen a
Yeah.
lot of those out
Yeah,
there.
so there are a few things that I've been playing, a few like little mobile games and stuff like that. But also, there's an app on Steam called Tabletop Simulator, and it's not the only one of these around, but it's kind of a cool one that just gives you like a virtual 3D table
Hmm.
with virtual components that you can kind of scatter around, and it's got kind of physics built in into the game, and you can play basically any board game you can think of. Somebody has put into this simulator engine.
Oh, cool.
Uh, yeah, so we've been playing. I've been playing Gloomhaven with a couple of buddies for basically the whole pandemic time,
Hmm.
when they can find an hour in the middle of the workday, usually
Yeah.
when they're not busy, and one of the joys of working from home.
Yep.
Uh,
So
yeah,
someone
so
builds the board game in Tabletop Simulator and puts it
basically,
in?
yeah, and they can automate some of the like more complicated rules elements of it. So like, rather than
Oh.
having to shuffle all these decks and put things together, you just like click a button and that sort of happens. But also, like, because it's just sort of a physical simulation of all these components, if you want to, you can like put in a command to like ping a little plastic miniature across the board, and it'll like bounce around and knock over other things, or flip over the
Oh,
whole table if you really want to, which
that's
is
what that game is. I always saw it,
yeah.
but I never knew because I know you could also buy these games on their own digitally,
Yeah,
what the Ticket to Ride or something,
sure.
Monopoly, even that kind of stuff. Like those people made those games on your phone and things like that.
Yeah, there are a lot of good implementations and some less good implementations of those games, but it's nice to have like that engine that you could kind of just put in for the people that have collections of like dozens of
Yeah.
board games like me, a wall of these boxes. It's nice to have something kind of equivalent that you can just like load something up.
Cool. Last question on board games before we move on is what is your favorite board game right now?
Ooh, right now is a tough one to answer because I've got some like long-term favorites that I haven't really played in years.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, the one that's probably bringing me the most joy right now is Well, I already said Gloomhaven, but I'm kind of in that zone. Maybe I'll say like King Domino is one that I've gotten a lot of joy out of over the past year, which is just like a little box. You can get it for like $20.
Mm-hmm.
It won a bunch of awards. You can play it in like 10 to 15 minutes. You can play it with kids. It's just
Oh,
like a good little colorful tile laying thing
oh, I love that.
that I recommend.
Sweet. Yeah, Laura and I got into two-player board games for a little bit too before we got the doggo. And then the doggo's like, no, no, no,
Taking over,
no.
yeah.
Your free time is for me. So, but we were playing Seven Wonders Duel, which
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's
I
good.
really loved it. I thought it was like an amazing two-player game. Yeah, it made me think back to the times when you and I would play like I don't know, like Lords of Waterdeep or
Right.
I don't know, Dominion, like those kinds of days where you have to like kind of look at a thing and think about what you want to do next. And I guess that's all board games. So like,
Ideally.
feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of them you roll some dice and then count and move a little piece around and don't
That's
think
true.
about what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how friendships are ruined is those usually those dice games, i.e.
Right.
Monopoly. Last question before we move on to the news of the week, because of course we have a lot to cover, and
Oh,
by a
yeah, so
lot, I
much
have no
news.
idea.
Yeah. Have
But
things happened? Maybe.
think apparently, but before that, I think this one needs a little bit more time because a lot of people have, I don't say flocked, but discovered D&D over the pandemic, and I would say
Wait. Are you talking about Dungeons and Dragons? Both of them?
both of them same time.
Yeah.
And I don't know what version because I don't know what version's out by now. What's the newest version of Dungeons
Oh,
and Dragons?
Tom. So yeah, the popular one these days is fifth edition or 5e to those in the know. That's not actually all that new anymore. I don't know. We were playing that
Weren't we
back when I
playing
was
that?
in
I
Ottawa.
was gonna
That's what we
say.
were doing, yeah. So that's the one that kind of came out most recently that really kind of like streamlined the system a little bit and made it kind of accessible to a lot of people. Not in a bad way. I think like they kept the rules as simple as they can. They're still complicated enough that there's a bit of a learning curve, and it's kind of free form enough that you can bend the rules and make them whatever you want to be, which is kind of like what it's all about at heart, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's the joy of Dungeons and Dragons, and like it's one of those things that I think has become more normalized over the years, I
Yeah, for
guess.
sure. Yeah, and that's the weird thing for older school nerds like me. I say like my older brother was playing like first and second edition, so I can't claim to be like one of the OG D&D
Sure.
people, but yeah, like the big adjustment of like you are not necessarily a nerd if you admit to playing D&D. Like there are jocks playing D&D. There are the cool kids are doing it. Like it's just fine. It's just a thing people do now.
That's I think that's such an amazing thing, and I just want to like point that out because like I just, for sure, like even when I first started playing D&D, and I wasn't huge, but I played a little bit back in the day when I was back in like grade 10, high school kind of thing, and then played a little bit over the years and stuff like that. But I've definitely seen a shift of like people putting up their nose and being like, Dungeons and Dragons, you suck. That's just for nerds. Take your dice and throw them off a boat. And now it's everybody, especially in pandemic, like there's a reason to be like, hey, let's just all like dive into this fantasy world away from COVID. And
people are definitely desperate for like, can somebody please run a game for me? I just want to be in an adventuring party.
Exactly. And they're building the story together. People are hiring people from Fiverr to be a DM and stuff like that. And they're like, you're right, like jocks, what is a jock anymore, but the popular kids and people that you wouldn't expect to play D&D, they're like, oh no, I have D&D this to like tonight, and it's so normalized, and I'm like, that's awesome.
I know some people who have been paid to run D&D games for sure. I haven't gone there to date, but also like all the podcasts and like actual live entertainment that people pay money for and like get really into, of just like people playing these games. Like I listen to kind of an atrocious number of actual play role playing podcasts. None of them actually D&D, but lots of other games. Yeah.
Whoa, that's. Maybe I should get into that market, Joe. We have a podcast idea. Are we gonna do a role play?
Not too late to get on that train. There's room in the cavern for sure for
Oh
some
yeah. Okay. All
adventuring.
right.
We'll talk.
Something to chew on. Yeah. Okay. Let's get into the news of the week. The news, of course, they're just pop culture headlines I'm pulling from IGN that I've never seen before. Let's see how tapped into pop culture we are, Joe. And the first
How tapped?
How tapped? First thing I gotta tell you is Elon Musk to launch SpaceX Doge One. It's a moon mission funded entirely by Dogecoin.
Mm-hmm. That's less exciting to me. When you said Doge, I thought you were going to say Dojo. I was like SpaceX Dojo, and I was kind of excited for a second because I was like, Elon Musk. Maybe we have mixed feelings about him. There's a lot to hate. There's maybe some things to like. I don't know.
I don't. I'll just lay it on the table. People already know this from Talking Tongue because we've somewhat talked about him in like previous episodes. I am neither a fan or a complete hater, but he does seem to be making too many big decisions that are affecting people in a negative way too. So I guess if I were to lean something, I kind of don't like him.
Yeah. And just like in general, like billionaires are not a good thing.
That's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm like, he seems okay. So he does some funny memes. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
But like he said something the other day, not to turn this around here, but like he said something the other day about like a Bitcoin finally, because he's been a huge proponent for Bitcoin. And then the other day, he's just like, Bitcoin's not environmentally friendly. He just said that line in a tweet or something like that. And immediately the value of Bitcoin went down like an absurd amount of money from one billionaire's voice. He has too much power, and I don't like that.
For sure. Which is a very, like, I sort of like that from a distanced perspective of like, this isn't affecting me personally, even though it is affecting the world. Like it's a very sort of cyberpunk thing to me in a way that I don't think anybody predicted, of like, yeah, you've got these giant corporations that have ridiculous amounts of power and are building spaceships and whatever, controlling the world. And you've got these weird fucking e-currencies that nobody really knows what they are. But also the fact that you've got this kind of like maniac meme lord CEO who just like doesn't seem to take things seriously and makes these wild decisions is just very like, we are living in a fantasy universe. Do you hear that vacuum cleaner going on outside?
No, outside. Vacuum cleaner outside. Wow. Oh, okay.
It's New Brunswick. We keep things clean here, you know?
I was gonna say the streets. You have a vacuum cleaner on the streets. That would
the lawn behind my apartment building.
You've summed it up. Like that's kind of how my feelings on him as well. Just kind of like from a distance, I think he's a very interesting person. And very cartoonish as well, but the power he has, and if he ever, and he's said this before, like running for like a greater political party and stuff like that, I'm like, no, not, people out there, do not do that.
Don't do it. He has just enough political savvy and acumen to like get a lot of power and fuck shit up with it. He has no business doing. I mean, stick to like coming up with creative little projects that might actually have some positive benefit, like solar panels and things.
Sure, I love that. Exactly.
Or a SpaceX dojo, which like if you're making astronaut ninjas and sending them up to Mars to like colonize Mars with a mystic sect of martial artists, then like, cool, I can get behind that as a human project.
That'd be cool. I'm just thinking about like if you had like martial artists on Mars and stuff like that, how would you, if you went for like a jumping kick, does that jump, are you just like floating for the rest of the time? Like you would just like jump once around Mars and you just...
Mars gravity is like, is it like 1/3 or 2/3 of, I think it's like 60% of Earth's, like it could be 1/3.
Okay. So you would just like float for a little while.
Yeah, you can just get some altitude on it. I think it'd be fine.
Okay. All right. I thought it would just be like an indefinite jump kick and you're just doing that.
I don't think you could like jump kick yourself into orbit on Mars, at least. Maybe Mercury. I don't know.
Yeah. Yet. Venom 2, everyone's favorite Venom. I'll go first by saying I didn't really like the first Venom movie. I thought it was completely mediocre to bad. I love Tom Hardy. I just thought this movie was like, this feels like a movie from like the early 2000s.
Yeah, when people were sort of trying to figure out what comic book movies are and not quite figuring it out yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the movie made a shit ton of money. Like a shit. Everyone loves Venom, and there's
Everyone
some
loves a
diehard.
sticky goo man.
Yeah, and he looks cool for sure, but yeah, I don't know. Did you see Venom 2, the trailer?
I think, yeah, I saw at least a trailer. I'll go one more than you and say I didn't like the look of the first Venom trailer and did not watch the movie.
Ah,
And I think it's always a little bit weird when Tom Hardy is in one of these big sort of action-packed things and you can see his face. I find that weird. I prefer my Mad Maxes where he's got like a cage over his face most of the time, or my Batmans where he's got a weird gas mask and a squeaky
yes.
voice.
Uh-huh.
That's how I like my Tom Hardys. I don't want to see the lower part of his face or hear him clearly.
He was good in Inception as well. He's one of those guys in Inception. He was the tough guy, and you see his bottom half of his face.
Okay.
But you're right. In Mad Max,
I was distracted by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, so he was all I could look at.
I mean, aren't we all distracted by him? Yeah, I don't know. We have Woody Harrelson playing the infamous Carnage.
Oh,
and Carnage, for the people who don't know, is, let's just say, Red Venom is the easiest way.
Yeah, he's like a slightly stickier, slightly pointier Venom goo man.
And very red, and he's pitched as like he's a psychopath. Like he has all he wants is death and carnage and stuff. Where Venom, like,
yeah,
he's been historically like anti-hero. Like he's a bad guy, but then he's a good guy, but he's also a bad guy. Yeah. It's all like
that. You could go out to brunch with Venom if you wanted to.
Yes.
You could. Yeah. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't invite Carnage out, which I guess is what the movie is about with this teaser trailer of like fucking he's sharing an apartment with Venom and they're trying to just get along and make breakfast and such. Is that?
Yes, that's what they're going
for. It seems very trying to glom onto the Deadpool sort of lightheartedness, which I don't know if doesn't do much for me.
Neither for me as well. Another story that I have today is Tom Cruise says Mission Impossible 7 stunt was the most dangerous thing he's ever done.
Well, I mean, he doesn't, obviously, every movie he does is going to be more dangerous. It doesn't mean the stunts are any different. He's just like, his hips are getting more breakable, buddy. He's like 60, right? Yeah.
My question to you, Joe, is we don't have to talk about Tom Cruise because this is not news to me. Tom Cruise does a Mission Impossible. He wants to do more stunts. We get it. Yeah. He's constantly trying to prove something, which is that he's still got it. Essentially,
he just wants to go to Valhalla. He just wants to die in a blazing Hollywood stunt from space. Yep. Falling.
Isn't he doing a stunt in space? Is that what?
That was the thing that he's been like trying to do for one of the Mission Impossibles is like, I got to get into space and like film some shit in a space station and punch some guys and we'll work it into the movie somehow. I think
that's just so funny. It's like,
again, I respect a little bit more than like, that's the SpaceX dojo as far as I'm concerned. That's adding something to humanity.
Okay. All right. I was going to say it's like, Tom, like there's CGI. We don't have to go to real space. And he's just like, no, we have to. It's for the artistic merits of Mission Impossible.
I kind of agree with that. Like, I think like Tom's not really doing any harm with his, massive celebrity at this point. Like when he was shilling for Scientology, he was a bit more of a questionable dude. But yeah. He's not so much actively doing that, I don't think, anymore. And like, yeah, I think if this is what he wants to spend his time on is like pushing the limits of, being a Jackie Chan in his late stage of his career, like that's great. And I think, I mean, I'm not like a huge movie guy or action movies specifically, but I feel like it does add something when you're doing real stuff. And like some of those Mission Impossible things where he's hanging onto the outside of a plane or like climbing up the actual Burj Khalifa or whatever. Like I feel like it makes a difference that it's somewhat real.
Yeah, you know what? That's true. Like in the other Mission Impossible movies, which I'm not a big fan of, but like I've seen, and the action scenes always look really gorgeous and stuff like that. But then I always look, I'm like, man, that seems expensive and really dangerous. Tom Cruise, he's just looking for it. He's looking for a little hurt. My question to you,
I
Joe,
say the Valkyries await you, Mr. Cruise. They are standing by to swoop in when you meet your fate.
Tessa Thompson's Valkyrie in Thor. That's
sure.
who's waiting.
Yeah.
My question to you, Joe, is what stunt at your age could you pull off right now?
I've been taking dance classes at some points in this. So that's, again, part of my New Brunswick privilege. I'm sorry, rest of the world. But we've had some like dance studios that are like in person open with some restrictions and distances and stuff like that. But so I'd say the biggest stunt I can like sort of pull off is like doing some like I don't know, sexy jazz funk dancing to like a Pussycat Dolls song or something like that. I don't know if I can pull it off, but that's what I'm working on.
I believe in you. I believe in you. That sounds good. I'm not sure what I could do. Like there was a time in my life when I was watching a lot of parkour videos on YouTube, and that just seemed really cool. And everybody who was like just jumping off, like, you know, just big buildings into another building and grinding on rails, but just with their sneakers and stuff. Yeah. And I would go to the park and just, I think everyone went through a phase like this somewhat where they just say parkour.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I remember twisting my leg doing that one time, and that was really bad.
Parkour is the most fucking deadly stunt because it looks like anybody could do it. And it's just like, just have the will to do it. You just got to have the courage to take the leap off the side of the building. And
that's exactly it. it. Okay.
And at the same time, it's also just like high-speed monkey bars for adults, which is like, how can that not be fun?
Exactly. All right. 2 more stories that I have for you. One of them, we'll start off with a low ball here. This one's not really a story. It's more like casting stuff. Did you watch Knives Out?
I've been fucking trying to watch. Sorry, can I fucking? Yes.
Yes, you just did. And it's fine.
We're gonna, okay. I have been sort of low-key trying to watch Knives Out, clearly not trying very hard since it came out. And I like missed it in theaters. And then it just like hasn't shown up on any of my streaming services. Maybe it's on Amazon or whatever. But I just like haven't been able to readily access it. So I haven't gone the extra step to like seek it out and pay money for it or whatever.
Yeah.
But I wanted to. Anyway.
Then I will skip this story because there's casting stuff, but you should watch Knives Out.
I know I should, but there's like multiple sequels or something, which also
Netflix
seems weird
bought
to
the
me.
rights for that. It's more like and this is not a spoilers, but Daniel Craig's character is the main character of Knives Out, and he's like the detective, if you will, try to solve the case in Knives Out 1, and then Knives Out 2 will be another case.
Solve some other case with more knives.
Yeah, more outs.
More outs. Okay.
More outs.
Knives really out. They're so far out.
Yeah.
And then the third one is Knives in Space.
2 Knives, 2 Furious.
Knives in Space in the Space Dojo.
Yeah. Another article headline, I'm going to do 2. What another 2? So here we go. One of them is there's a Friends reunion, and it's not really the core of the conversation I wanted to bring up to you, but it's more like the Friends reunion is finally happening, blah, blah, blah. I was an okay Friends fan growing up, but I never actually watched the entire show straight through. I kind of watched the beginning, really liked it, fell off, saw the finale, and I had my piece with it. But Friends is obviously still one of the most beloved sitcoms from back in the day. It's like one of those Office things where people like remember these shows. And
90s cultural cornerstone.
Exactly.
Like it or not. Yeah.
So what if I told you that the Friends reunion that's finally coming back after 17 years on
Wait. My jaw is dropping already preemptively because your tone is just really selling this.
What if I told you that the Friends reunion also has special guests BTS, Lady Gaga, David Beckham, Justin Bieber, James Corden, Kit Harington, Mindy Kaling, Thomas. There's a lot of people then I'm like, why are these people in the Friends reunion?
That's what if you told me that? I would say that they're trying very hard, aren't they? They're trying. That's a sad thing. They're trying hard. Is that what TikTok kids say when they describe something as sweaty? Is that a thing, or is that a Twitch speak?
I think that's a Twitch thing. Like when you're like, but I thought that was like, you know, I'm not part of either of those communities.
Either way, it sounds sweaty in every way I can think of the word. It's too sweaty for me. No, thank you. No, thank you, friends.
What if I told you Reese Witherspoon's also part of this?
Wait.
Still sweaty.
I don't begrudge her that.
Tom Selleck, he was actually in Friends, so that's fine.
Was he?
Yeah.
That makes me see Tom Selleck. I feel like that's appropriate. I feel like these like BTS and like the people of the moment, the hot shit of the now, seems totally inappropriate. Like, absolutely bring Tom Selleck in there.
Yeah,
you know, whatever.
That makes sense to me.
90s thing. So go back in time and do that.
Yeah, if it was like Friends reunion with like guest stars from Friends in the past, do it. The guys can
get the all ugly naked guy special, which
yes, yeah. But what's Justin Bieber doing there? Let's be real. Like, come on.
I would love to see the whole show from that nudist neighbor's perspective, and like have it be like a real like body positivity thing. Like, he doesn't think of himself as ugly; he thinks of himself as beautiful. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think I was always a bit too hipster for Friends. I always was like, I can't enjoy Friends. It's too cool.
You put up your nose and you're like, I'm more of a Frasier guy.
I wasn't that either. Yeah. Actually, I think I just didn't have access to TV a lot for those periods.
I heard you didn't even know what a TV was up until recently.
True.
The last story I have for you, and of course, I wanted to start with end with something very exciting. And maybe this is a spoilers, but here we go. Yes, Michael Jordan will be in Space Jam 2.
Oh, we were all wondering. Gonna do it. Where's he been? They got him out of cryogenic suspension.
And I know, Joe, that you have you're the biggest Michael Jordan fan.
Biggest Space Jam fan on this call for sure. For sure. Do you want me to make an admission? I think last time we did a podcast, Tuong, I had never watched Space Jam.
And
subject probably came up on most of the podcasts that I did with you, most of the ranked episodes.
Yeah, it's still showing up on mostly every episode I'm on for anything.
Yeah, no doubt. I just kind of kept my head down. And since then, I've had a lot of time and a lot of streaming services, and some of them have Space Jam on them. And I think I watched the first 2/3 of Space Jam. And then for some reason I stopped.
Some reason is that it was a bad movie, or
maybe I'm not sure. I can't put that on Space Jam. We're all in funny places psychologically at this time. I could have had any reason to stop watching it. I'm not going to cast judgment on Space Jam or the Space Jam franchise.
Thank you. I respect that. This is a Space Jam friendly show, so I respect that very much, Joe. Thank you. Okay, let's stop chatting about that. We have a movie to talk about, a movie that Joe, like every week I ask, well, sometimes I force a movie on people if I really want to see it, but this week I was just like, you know what is Joe thinking? What kind of movie is Joe feeling right now? And you were really into a Frances McDormand phase. You want to say what movie you chose?
For sure. I'll just say, like, in following Tuong's antics and posts and social media presence, the juggernaut that you are as a pod cavern entity, I'm like, man, you're always so like on top of these pop culture things that I feel like I'm always like 6 to 18 months behind all of them. And I'm like, man, I wish I could like be up to date and current and chat with you about this stuff. But I'm mostly not. And like I just watched The Mandalorian finally. But then I've been hearing about this word, Nomadland.
You are one of those lucky people that can travel anywhere.
Yes, ma'am, I know.
And they sometimes call you nomads.
My mom says that you're homeless. Is that true?
No, I'm not homeless. I'm just houseless. Not the same thing, right?
kicked around, and I liked it. I liked the sound of those words. I didn't know what it was. I heard Frances McDormand. I liked those words. And I started to see this Nomadland appear on some of those aforementioned streaming services. And I was like, I should watch that. And so when you came to me, I was like, that's a movie that maybe is good, and maybe I'll try watching it.
I'm so happy that you chose this movie, because I've talked about this in previous episodes of Talkin' Tongue, but like every year for the Oscars and for Ranked, I would watch every single or most of the Academy type of movies just because I like to rank them afterwards. And I like movies a lot. Last year was weird because of the pandemic, and the Oscars got pushed and not a lot of things came out. And I
had no movies. We had no one to love. You had to get a dog instead.
Exactly. And I'm going to turn my dog into a movie afterwards. But I wasn't. What the spark of wanting to watch a movie was no longer there last year. I just wanted something comfortable and easy. And I find like a lot of Oscar type movies is like, you got to invest, you got to really sit down and watch this thing. But this movie won Best Picture at the Oscars and had a ton of accolades. And it's one of those things that I needed an excuse to watch. So I'm glad you picked it.
Did not even realize that it won Best Picture. After watching it, I knew that it was sort of well regarded and stuff. Wow, that's cool.
It won Best Picture. It won like 4 awards. The Best Picture, Frances McDormand won Best Actress. Chloe Zhao, who's the director, who's also directing Eternals, Marvel's Eternals.
Shit. Wow.
Yeah, which was a huge deal because she was like, I think the first woman of color who like won this type of award.
Right.
So it was like this was really big for her and just Nomadland in general. So yeah, it won a ton of stuff. What did you think about it?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you this. I was also glad that I suggested it because, it was one of those things I didn't know what I was getting into very much. I didn't want to learn too much about it before going into it. Aside from what I already said about like Frances McDormand is cool, and just the concept of people sort of living without homes or with mobile existences. I don't know. Where do you want me to start with this?
I guess like we can start with let's start with like your gut reaction of how you feel, and you don't have to get into it, and then we can maybe bring it back to like the quick summary of what the movie.
Sure. Yeah, I got sort of a couple of big thoughts about it. One, I remember like just when the movie started and the first couple of scenes, and you just see sort of Frances McDormand living this life. It starts out pretty friggin' bleak, just in vibe and those opening shots, and it really struck me as just like I was thinking about Frances McDormand as like a trilogy almost of, I know she's done a ton of things, but in terms of vehicles that really focus on her as the main protagonist, I was like going from Fargo to, I had also just recently watched 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. Is that
that's it? And those are the 2 other movies she won Best Actresses for.
Right. Which it makes sense. So it is like, it sort of makes sense as a bit of a trilogy. And those 3 movies going from like this sweet, cheerful police officer, detective in Fargo, living in a place with like largely nice people who support each other in this like happy family with a husband who gets up and makes her breakfast, and she's just doing her thing. And, yes, she runs into some dark characters and some people who are, feeding their friends into wood chippers and such. But like, it's just such a positive existence largely for that character. And then going into 3 Billboards, where she is like, her character is a much sadder person, has had some personal tragedy and is, pitting herself against her local community to some extent, but still like has her little core existence, her home, her son, she's still hanging on to the things that she's got. And then from there to Nomadland, Frances McDormand, where she's, a little bit older and a lot more alone, and a lot more uprooted, and a lot more peeing in cold snow-covered fields and pooping in buckets. It's just like, oh no, honey.
Oh no. So better not to think about it as a trilogy.
Well, sort of. I mean, it's not all 100% negative, bleak times. but it's interesting and yeah, a little dark to think of it in those terms.
Yeah, for myself, like, yeah, I really wanted to watch this because, you know, people kept talking about it. And I also had no idea what this movie was about. I remember the poster and I know Frances McDormand, and that's all I knew going into this movie. And I knew it was getting a little bit of big buzz too, from not just the awards, but Chloe Zhao as well. It was just like, okay, this is a movie I should pay attention to. And I think the gut reaction that I had after coming away from it was that I liked it. I did like this movie. I thought it was good. I don't think it was the profound movie that I maybe unfairly set myself up that this movie would be. I think maybe for some people it would be, but
I'm glad that I didn't know that it was like the award winner and like the extent of the accolades. I guess I didn't have as many expectations going in.
But even still, it took me a little bit to get into the pacing of the movie, and we'll get into like what this movie is in a bit. But like, yes, I wasn't expecting a lot. The movie is a lot of wide vista desert shots and lots of driving and lots of Frances McDormand outside close-up shots. And I was looking at this and I'm like, man, this movie has a lot of the same shots going on. And then I started to think about why. And it's like, oh, it's a kind of like highlighting this feeling of being alone out there, being a nomad. And this is kind of what you would see and how you would experience it. And this whole movie, which is, we can get into this, like the actual story in a second, which is just kind of like her life living as a nomad. And we see a lot of bits and pieces of that as the movie goes on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny, like, yeah, talking about the pacing of it and just the overall feeling of it, because also one of the first things that struck me was, I mean, I don't think a lot about the story of the film because there's not a whole lot plot wise going on. It's just learning a little bit more about where she comes from as a character. Her name is Fern, you know, what situation she's coming from, what led her to here, and how she's kind of adjusting to this different life. But the whole vibe of it really strikes me as like, it feels like a documentary in a lot of cases. It feels like you're just getting little shots, little vignettes of day-to-day life of people who seem extremely real to me. And I looked up afterwards, I was like, are these people all actors? Is some of this just like real improvised like moments? And like, I guess not. It is scripted, right? It's fully, but like, I'd say at least half of the scenes in there feel like they could just be like, oh yeah, here's this actual gathering of traveling people, and like we plopped down a camera and like had people talk. Like, and Frances McDormand fits in with that perfectly. Like she seems, she does not seem like any of the other roles I've seen her in. She just feels like a very
human type. Yeah, it's so down to earth. And I agree with that. Yeah, it's not like a grand performance. It's very subtle, which is what makes it so good. And this movie is based on a book, I believe, which is based on real story, and then it was adapted to screenplay here. So it is rooted in real stuff. And like the whole I forget exactly the town it's called. I'm blanking on it.
Empire. I forget the state.
But that's how Arizona. You set up this movie, is like there's this little place, Empire, that was just kind of run by this like a factory or of some sort, a mine. Yeah. And people live there because of this entity. But as soon as that kind of all collapsed on its own, everyone kind of had to move away. They had no reason to live in this place anymore. And with Frances McDormand's character, she didn't know where to go. That's kind of like a thing that you discover as you discover more about her character in the story. It's like she's never felt like she's belonged in one place, really, kind of thing, unless she was with her husband who's passed away. And now she doesn't feel comfortable living in one space anymore, I guess, is what I've got from it.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot, like in terms of, you know, you talking about what the movie is about and like her not being comfortable in one space. Like to me, it's very much all of those shots of the landscapes and like the wide shots and the shots of people alone. Like to me, the movie is very much about like her relationship with communities and other people in general, because it's like she definitely does connect with communities. They
absolutely
transitory communities or short term, and she does like hold herself back. I think that's like a major character and story element of like how much does she allow herself to get close to other people, other individuals. How much does she resist that? But also like people's connection to the land, and also people's connection to things, like the material possessions play a big role, I think, in the movie, in terms of like I think it starts, maybe even the first scene is her going into like her old garage and like getting out some like old heirlooms and like putting them in her van and like hanging on to these things, or like passing things around that you don't need anymore and like exchanging stuff. Just like all the things people do to get by, and all the people do to like feel like they I don't know, have a home, even without a house, I guess, is part of it.
I think that was like a thing that she said in the movie, which is she says, "I'm not homeless, I just don't have a home." And I think that's like it rings true to like nomads in this movie, and I guess that in real life it's like no, like the road and the openness of connecting with communities as you travel, and like having lunch at the side of a beautiful cliff where there's water and stuff like that is home to these people. So when you bring them into the space of like a real home and like the suburbs and stuff like that, it's like, ooh, this doesn't feel right. I can't stick around here. I'd much rather be kind of like in this small little like trailer van type of situation.
This cube, being cold on the side of the road,
being cold, sleeping in parking lots and stuff. And they prefer that. Like that is their method of living. And there's several moments in the film where they connect with other like-minded individuals and nomads into these spaces. And they have these completely real conversations that you're talking about here. They sound very, the performances are really good because they just sound like how we're talking right now. And even actually a little bit more muted than that. They just sound like people talking, which is really, really cool.
For sure. Tuong, do you like camping? How do you feel about camping?
I like glamping a lot.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Something like that seems to check out.
Yeah, I like glamping. I like the idea of camping. I'm just not well versed in it. I would definitely not be able to build a fire. Like I mean, I can do it at my fireplace, just like kind of next to me in this room, but I have like tools and stuff like that to use.
I'm probably like slightly more advanced than that in terms of camping. Like it's been a long time for me, but like, you know, I can set up a tent and I can chop up some kindling and I can like build a fire, you know, with, you know, probably like 2 matches, maybe not 1 match. But like, you know, I can do that stuff. I don't like all the like organizing and getting prepared and like having my food supplies and my water and all that shit. But like, I enjoy spending a night or 2 in a tent. But like the idea of just like doing that always, just like that kind of like keeping track of your supplies, using what you can like make, you know, eating a lot of noodles. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I mean, part of me really, really likes it, but it's what I also like about it is it's temporary. I can always come back to like normal. Exactly. That feeling of like, the part of the feeling of camping that's so great, or like hiking in the woods, is like, wow, this is going to feel so great when I can stop doing this. Right? It's like I'm hating this and I'm enjoying how much I'm kind of hating this, and it will be over at some point, and then I'll think fondly on it. And you know, there are
I completely agree. And it's so funny, like you bring that up, because when Laura and I, little tangent on just camping, but I guess it relates to the movie, of this idea of like kind of fending for yourself and stuff like that. But we went camping at this campsite that's like literally 10 minutes away, not very far from our house, but there's like nice little campsite you can hole up in, and there's electricity for your phones, because that's the kind of camping we would do. And there's like nice body of water, and you're really not that far from like the closest grocery store if you just drive out. And Laura and I we stayed for 1 night, and we brought so many things with us, like just an absurd amount of camping things that we needed. And if you look at them, like real campers, people who like actually do this not glamping style, would like scoff at us, because it's ridiculous the amount of stuff we brought with us.
Yeah, I would consider like real camping, and this is like above and beyond what I would typically do, but like real camping to me would be like, you bring what could fit in a canoe, basically. Like assume that you're going to have to travel by water to somewhere, and then get out and like cool. Then you're proper camping.
Yeah, and you're like pooping in a hole, and you're like putting your like all of your stuff, and you're tying it up like really high in a tree and stuff like that. That's what I view real camping as.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't have to think about bears, then you're not really camping.
Yeah, and I don't. So,
and don't you like to sometimes? Don't you like to just sit and think about bears for a bit?
I like yes, I kind of like the idea of thinking about bears that I don't have to deal with. You know? Yeah.
I'm thinking about a grizzly bear right now.
And did you win?
Oh, I'm not. It's just sitting on top of a hill. It's eating berries. I'm watching it from a safe distance. It's nice.
It might see you in a bit if you think about it any longer.
That's true. Okay, I'm going to end that thought.
And that
pulled me out of that before it got dangerous.
So yeah, you're right. This movie doesn't have much of story, so it's not something that I can immediately spoil for anybody. But I think a lot of this is tone, and it's a lot of you have to, I would say, try not to be too distracted when you're watching the movie, because you have to really be in it to feel it, because it's like the score is like piano, right? It's very like kind of melodramatic and slow and that kind of stuff. And if you're not like, Captain Meatball was being like a real big, he was a big troublemaker as I was watching this movie. So I had to play tug with him as I'm watching this movie for the first 20 minutes. And I was just not feeling this movie, but that's on me, because like the movie demands a little bit more attention than that if you really want to feel what it's trying to tell you.
Yeah, like I think as far as story goes, like a lot of the story that is there is kind of implied rather than set right out for you. Like you kind of really have to think about what's going on with her and where and what she's going to do at the end of the movie as well. Like where this is leading her, I think, is kind of an interesting question that the movie leaves you with.
I like and I wonder, and I have to imagine people still do this, and that's really cool, because I've never really thought about the idea of a nomad. I didn't really know what that was, to be honest, until I watched this movie.
So can I take this down a bit of a nerdy path again?
Of course. Dungeons and Dragons, let's go.
Well, basically, actually more cyberpunk again, because in the old cyberpunk role-playing game, and I don't know if this is true in like the recent video game that they came out with, a sort of revamp version of it, so Cyberpunk 2077 or whatever. In that game world, one of the types of people you can be, one of the character classes, is a nomad, and the way they're framed in that world is, these are people who have basically been uprooted by corporations or whatever, like wrecking their homes, and they have to go like live outside of society in these caravans and like form their own kind of family units to travel around to get by, which definitely this movie made me think of like, again, this is like one of the more cyberpunk things in the ways that we don't always think about that term, if people think about that term at all, because it's not about high tech, it's about how economic disparity has like fucking uprooted people, and they have to get by scrabbling around in the dirt and make their own societies and struggle against that machine. Which is interesting to me and sad, and also like recognizing that like this is very much now, it's not the future. And like even the first time we see Fern traveling around to like work, like she's trying to find work, she's not just like being a total hobo or foraging or whatever. She's going from place to place to do hard jobs, and the first time we see her is like working for Amazon, and she's happy to have that job, but it looks it grinds people down, you can see it. And like, cool, she'll like work for Amazon as long as they'll have her, and then she'll roam off and try to find something else, and like that's how much the company cares about these people.
Like very seasonal type of work. And they'll take basically like I feel like a lot of the community with the nomads is like they know what businesses will take them for temporary work. Like they work at like a campground for a little bit, like Fern does, and she also works at like a restaurant for a little bit,
and harvesting like beets, which is just like hard to watch, this like physical labor, and she's like in her mid 60s, just like, you know, not complaining about it, but like later on you hear her just like talk about how her knees aren't that good anymore, and like you can just see like you can't do this forever.
Yeah. But it's interesting to me because I think another theme in the movie is, and you're totally right. And I think this is such a now thing of like this idea of corporations kind of pinning people down and telling you this is the way you should live, but also being in control of giving people homes. And if they take that away from people and not give them any type of safety net afterwards, and kind of saying, hey, just go fuck off and just try to live on your own, that feels like a real thing. And like with nomads, and a lot of people were kind of forced into this idea of being a nomad and traveling around and stuff, but you can also see that some people also prefer it because
they discover something really authentic in that they didn't have.
And that's another thing that happens in the movie is that someone like her sister is like, this reminds me of like the pioneers of America and stuff like that. This is how they like kind of operated and lived their life. And there's something really distilled and kind of beautiful about this idea of like, fuck this idea of like how we're supposed to live and these structures and things that like humans thought of and that say this is how you should live. And instead let's like distill it into like this idea of community and traveling and just finding these like moments of beauty in nature in the world. And then when we need to come back together to get like the very basic things, we can like barter and trade with one another. And you get a lot of those
rocks. Those are the things that we can find meaning in. So a lot of collecting of cool rocks in the film.
Yeah. And it's cool too. Yeah. Like they set up next to each other and they start to all kind of know each other just by kind of like meeting and gathering at these places. And it's just like, you're right. Like someone's just like, I got a bunch of these rocks. I'll give you this rock for this lighter. And it's like just this trade system that's very simple, but no exchange of real currency. No Bitcoin, no Dogecoin.
No Doge. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. What is there anything? Oh, there is one thing I wanted to bring up because I think it was really important. There was a controversy behind this movie. And I didn't know about it, but Laura reminded me about it yesterday. I'm like, what was the controversy of this movie? And it was that in the book version of this movie, it pointed out more of how shitty a company Amazon was to work for. And in this movie, even though you did bring it up that it's like grinds you and stuff like that, she seems to be a little bit more just happy that she has a job.
Yeah, the couple of lines about it are like, I love Amazon. That's a great one. The money's fantastic. Yeah, everything that is said out loud is very positive.
Yeah, whereas some people are like, well, in the book and in real life, Amazon's a pretty shitty place to work. And I think that's something to say to like, Chloe Zhao, the director, it's not the story she chose to tell, I guess. It's not really about how shitty of a company Amazon is, and it is, but like it's the story is not this. The story is about the nomads, I guess, and this other journey.
I can see that being a controversy if people think that like, hey, we specifically didn't want to talk about this because we didn't want to make them mad, or that, you know, whatever, they had some hand in this or whatever specifically. But I agree that like what it's saying about companies like Amazon is a little more subtle and a little more like, the implication to me is pretty clear of like, you may say that it's great in this instance compared to some other things, but
I wonder,
like, really okay.
They show the logo a couple times. I have to imagine that.
They'd have to get permission at least to show it, right? So maybe there was some bargaining that had to go on there.
Yeah. Is there any favorite moments in this movie that you wanted to go through?
I don't know. There's a big dinosaur that I think of a lot, just like little things that like they enjoy along the way, as little like vignettes traveling around. Just little bits of landscape, like when they're in the Badlands and she's just kind of like, she just decides to run off for a while and like run through this maze of big rocks and like stuff like that like you're not totally sure like what it's about, but it's just like a little moment. You mentioned also like eating at the side of a ravine and or the side of a cat, what do you call it, like chasm, in just like these crazy scenic places. And that was like one of the first scenes that I thought of as well, of like when it seemed actually positive, that you see all these bleak things, all this struggle, but like, oh, also they have folding chairs and can just put them up next to this fucking beautiful place and eat a meal.
Yeah.
And like, oh, that's like in 6 seconds, that does so much to show the other side of things.
I like that stuff too. I also like the scenes with, like, there's this another person that, I guess, spoilers, that she talks about how she has only a couple months to live and she needs to like reach this spot so she can kind of like trigger like one of her happiest memories kind of things. It was like a bunch of birds and things like that. And she does pass away, and then you have the rest of the nomads meet up again at some point to just kind of honor her memory by throwing rocks into a fire. And I think that was just like it's a very simple moment, but to me it really worked because it was sad, but everyone respected it, and they all kind of respect each other. And it's I'll see you down the road moment, which is a quote in the movie.
That moment was specifically set up that like, this is what she wanted to have happen when she died. And like, then we see it happen later on. Yeah. And I think even one of the people in that, they're just all throwing little rocks into the fire, which is something that she requested. And you see some old friend of hers, I guess, just like tossing her or holding up a rock and saying, you know, this is for Swanky because she loved rocks. Yeah, throwing it in, and like that, the simplicity of that, you don't get much more simple of an idea than she loved rocks, so here is a rock. But yeah, for sure.
And I think the last thing I'll point out is like there is like a pseudo, not love interest, because it's not that, but a pseudo
it feels partner. Set up to be that.
Yeah. And it's someone who's also a nomad, and then they go through a very fleeting type of companionship where, and it's one of those things where it's because the way the movie structured, it's not very linear. There's a lot of like time skips. So in one scene, they're really mad at each other, Frances McDormand's really mad at him. And then the next scene, it's like, hey, do you want to like drive all the way over here and work at a restaurant with me? And then, hey, do you want to come, visit me at my family's house? And then, hey, do you want to live here? And I thought that whole arc was really, really interesting because it really kind of pinned down the mindset of someone like Fern of kind of breaking and like kind of spreading your roots into somewhere, allowing yourself to do that again. And you can see it in her body language, even when she visits her sister. And then at this guy's house, it's just like, I don't belong in this place. And they don't say that ever. It's just the way she acts just says it for you.
Yeah. There's something else. I mean, it's definitely something I like a lot about the movie, and that I find like painful and like difficult, is trying to figure out like what is at the heart of Fern's character here in terms of like personal relationships, and specifically with men too. Cause she does, again, like, the barest little bit of spoiler is that like we learn she did have a husband who died, and she's sort of like she's been sorting out her life alone in different ways, but her relationship with like men she meets specifically seems like a little weird, that she's like very guarded, very cagey, very skittish almost, whether they're strangers or people she knows a little better. And like, I wonder if there's some kind of like trauma in there too, or if that's sort of implied, or just like, you know, she doesn't like to be surprised by men. She doesn't like to have people in general trying to get too close to her, more than just like not wanting to be tied down by society. There's something a little more personal there too, that is hard, I find.
Yeah. This movie is interesting. I really enjoy talking about it too, because like as I'm watching it, it feels like, oh, this movie, not a lot happens. And then as we discuss it, it's like, oh, it's not about the content. It's about, or maybe it is about that, but it's not about the story. It's about like the whole theme of the movie. And I feel like there's a lot of meat to unpack for this one. And I really, now that we talked about it some more, I feel like I grown to appreciate it even more. So I get it.
I love that all those questions exist. Yeah. And talking about it like this for sure helps.
Yeah. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up over here on Nomadland?
No, Madland. No, slightly sad at times, but
Sad land?
contemplative.
Yeah.
Contemplative land. Yeah, not entirely sad land. Thoughtful, somewhat sad land.
Are you glad land? You watched the movie?
I'm absolutely glad land. I watched it. Yeah.
Okay, Joe.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to rate this movie for me?
I think I gotta give it like a full 5 out of 5 plastic buckets full of poop. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean like, sometimes just having a poop is the satisfying thing. And you poop where you gotta poop and you use what you got to take care of it. And
And there's different size buckets in this movie that imply sometimes you need a 2 liter, sometimes you need a bigger one.
Exactly.
It depends on your butt.
It's really the defining metaphor for our lives in these times.
Well, Joe, this was a lovely conversation talking about all things with you and this movie. Before we go, do you have anything to plug for the people at home?
Yeah, for sure I do. I obviously get vaccines if you can, and if you haven't yet, I'm trying. Once I get out of my 2 weeks of isolation, I will be doing that first thing. Otherwise, plug trying some role-playing games. After this, I'm going to be playing a game of Pathfinder with a couple of friends that's been going on all through COVID. And then later tonight, I'm running a game called Blades in the Dark with some Toronto friends.
Wow.
So, they have really helped to keep me connected and feeling creative and all that good stuff in this time.
That's just another role play game, Blades in the Dark.
Oh yeah, I could. We could take a whole other podcast.
Okay, then we won't. It sounds dangerous in the dark, even.
Yeah, man, it's pretty edgy, pretty grim, but very very good, creative, improv-y. Nice.
Cool. I like that. For myself, you can find the rest of the shows in the Pod Cavern at www.podcavern.com. Check out all the shows in the Pod Cavern. Buy yourself a t-shirt at the Pod Cavern merch store. Show some love over here, and we get a little bit of a kickback. And you got some swanky stuff to put on your skin. So isn't that a win-win situation, Joe?
Oh yeah, I would love stuff on my skin. I'm sorry that I don't have anything to put on my skin. You've had to look at my naked body this whole time.
I know. We're waiting for the Pod Cavern thumb shirts that you've been requesting. You're the only person who's requested it, so it's weird.
All thumbs all the time. Plus the one of me covered in wearing only board games. I would love to see that shirt.
Do you want it? Because I can make that into a shirt. I really can.
Maybe. We'll talk.
Okay, we'll talk because that might be really funny. All right. Well, that's it for us over here at Talkin' Tongue. We're going to see you guys next week on another episode. Until then, Joe has a world famous catchphrase.
Oh, yeah. All thumbs, baby.
Bye, everyone.